Good morning. It's Wednesday and it is September 28th. I'm Susan Moore. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at IIBA.
We've got a great topic lined up today for you to ask us questions live, business analyst job titles.
This is a really hot topic, especially because the job market for business analysis professionals is really hot. So we want to give you some tips, some hacks, some research, let you know about what you should be looking for if you are in the market.
Yes, that's right. And business analyst job titles, it's a little bit challenging because business analyst, those two words together is the most commonly used term to describe what we do. But there are many different positions and job titles where you're doing business analysis work. So we're going to explore a little bit of that today.
We're going to go broad here. And as always, we are live. And I know we're going to get questions today. So make sure if you've got questions about job titles, put that into the comments today. So we want to answer your questions. You can also, if you don't get a chance to ask us a question while we're live, you can still ask us a question live at iiba.org. And we take a look at that box, either answer your questions here or heck, it could even be our next topic for a broadcast.
That's right. So let's start at the very broad concept of business analysis. So people can be working and doing business analysis work in their daily lives or their work. And Jared, our head of chapters, reminds me of a grocery list. As you know, a grocery list is really a list of requirements to go to the store, get everything on that list, and success looks like you got everything on the list, right? So business analysis are skills that you can use in your daily life and in your business life. And in business roles, we like to put job titles around things to describe what somebody does. But I've seen some recent ones that are very creative, that you would never really guess what they're doing. So it can be misleading. So Susan, you've been working with some recruiters and talking about how to get jobs in the business analysis field. What type of advice are you hearing from them about searching for a business analysis type role?
Well, the first thing that I asked them just for fun was how many kinds of business analysis job titles did they have in their database? And so this one recruiter said they had almost 800 that had something to do with business analysis. And sometimes it had business analysis or analyst in the title, but really almost 800. So now that gives you a sense of why it can be so challenging if you're in the job market to know what to look for. So there's a couple of things that she mentioned. And first of all, the first thing that she said is you are sometimes better served working with a recruiter in this space who knows the market.
Okay.
And I guess if I've got almost 800 job titles to choose from, having somebody who understands what's in their database, what the market is looking for these days as far as skills, that would be good. And I think it gives you some personal guidance in your job search. She did say that, we've done a couple of career webinars recently, and we've focused on resumes and interviews. And the advice the recruiters give for that part of the job search is think about your achievements, right? That's what's going to make you different when you apply for something. But when you're looking for a job, think about your responsibilities. Think about things like the tools that you use, the skills that you have, what domain knowledge you have. All of those can be keywords that could be in job titles. So for example, when I looked in that database, I saw a lot of titles around tools. SharePoint analyst, Salesforce analyst, Workday analyst. So taking the time to know what the keywords are for the kind of work that you want to do, not job title, the kind of work that you want to do, will help you to find job titles that matter. And then her last piece of advice was, and I'll quote her, titles aren't created equally. And that's really what you said. Don't immediately self-eliminate you from looking further into that job just because it has a strange name. So for example, solution analyst, and you might think, well, I don't do a lot of solutioning. Well, but it still is an analyst. dive in. I am sure that you will see some responsibilities in there that are similar to what you're doing. So that was her advice.
Okay. Yeah, and some of that resonates with me. We just have a question here about someone asking about seeing roles like Salesforce business analyst, and you'd mentioned something like that,
Mhm.
a Dynamics 365 business analyst. How do we reconcile this with a regular business analyst? It's a great question. We've got an infographic here I'll share in a minute, but I think what you're looking at there is there are different ways you can be more specific in terms of your focus. It could be, in these particular cases, you're focused on a technology. So it might be CRM, it might be cybersecurity, but you can also focus on a business domain. So it might be a financial analyst, you're working in the finance space. So that word, as you said, analyst being tagged with different things, really, I think getting into finding a position might be part of the challenge, but then reading through the responsibilities, and as you said, what were your accomplishments, what were your responsibilities, and how they align. I do recognize that in some cases, you might have some domain knowledge or industry knowledge that doesn't apply to the new industry you're going to. If you're talking to the hiring manager, I think as a manager myself, you can make that leap of, well, you worked in this industry, but I see how you can work here. If you're dealing with a recruiter, my experience is it's difficult to get beyond the recruiter because they see that as one of those screening elements.
Yeah. And to answer the maybe with a little more detail on the specific tools, when you see those kinds of roles, whether it's SharePoint or Salesforce or whatever the tool is, just know that they are looking for somebody with that technical expertise. So that really does need to be, when you're thinking about your achievements, do you have a lot of achievements with those tools? Because that will eliminate you if you don't have experience. However, I've been a SharePoint analyst, and so I can tell you that the rest of the work that I did was very much in the business analysis domain. So if you like the tool, if you want to dive deeper into it, those roles could be they could be your sweet spot.
Yeah.
Um, so let's see. Well, let's since we're already getting questions, let's just go to the next one. What is the role of an IT BA, and is it different from a normal BA? So this one is, I think, that some of that domain expertise that you were just talking about.
Yeah, so an ITBA, I've had lots of job titles over my career. Business systems consultant is one of those. Really, I think what they're differentiating here is someone who's working in an IT department, working with stakeholders around applications. Normal BA, the way it's quoted in the question, really is a business analysis professional that is generically working on different things. So the way I read and interpret ITBA is someone that's got more experience in a technical field. I have worked with people that have come from business roles, and they're more business focused. So that's where you might see HR analyst relative to an IT BA, as an example. Why don't I pull up the infographic, Susan, and we can sort of explore this. There's lots of rich data on it.
Yeah,
So let me
and I
just,
think this'll also start to broaden our conversation because we've focused on domain. So a domain could be IT, it could be finance, HR, payroll, billing, telecom. By the way, that when I was mining through some of that data that this recruiter sent me, those were the kinds of domain areas that I was noticing.
okay. Yeah. So this is an infographic that's on our website. Roslyn, who's working on the magic in the background, she'll drop a link into the chat. And here we've got a diagram that talks about business analysis. On the left, it's more strategic type of roles, more operational at the top here and more tactical on the right. But before we explore that, let's go a little further down here. There's also these wedges of the pie, if you will, about business data analytics, cybersecurity, agile product ownership. So there's lots of little dots on here. So let's explore those a little bit, Susan. Let's start on the tactical side here. So one role here, here's my role, for example, business analysis manager. There's also a financial analyst, a technical functional analyst. This is where you might see IT analyst. What are some of the ones that are jumping out for you?
So because I spent a lot of my, well, maybe half, I spent about half my business analysis profession on the business side, I take a look at things like business or an IT architect. On the operational side, I think those are, those can span both business and technology. In fact, they do. That's exactly where they spend a lot of their time. Business process architect, business process analyst. Those also, I think, are more focused on uh, the business kind of bigger picture business issues. And then over on the strategic side, now you're working at the upper levels of an organization, helping them to define roadmaps. So again, I think in terms of um, enterprise architect. I don't know why architect keeps sticking out for me. Strategy analyst. Um, so these are folks who are practicing business analysis. So let's kind of define why they're on the top of this instead of the bottom. So in this area, you are talking about roles that are deeply using business analysis. We often talk about that T shape. T is the deep dive into the business analysis skill set. And these roles are applying that more broadly across the business. Now, they may have domain expertise. They may work in insurance or they may work in utilities or something, but they're spanning that and they're going deep. The roles below that are the top of that T, where they are special. They're still using business analysis, but now they are more broadly applying that to data analytics or agile or product ownership. Also, those happen to be standards that IIBA has, so that's why they're there as well.
Yeah, that's right. And some of these might resonate with some people around product manager or a product owner on the product side, cybersecurity analyst. The further you go out on the circle, the more senior the roles are getting. So you can see here's a chief security and information officer, business intelligence analyst. So I think this is a really good illustration of we're not just a business analyst job title. There are many, many titles, which is great in some ways that there's so many diverse roles that are using business analysis skills, but can be challenging in some ways if you're looking for a specific type of role. So hopefully these give you some ideas of something that you might be interested in or different job titles. Let's continue on taking some questions here, and I'll take the screen share down.
And these aren't the only job titles out there. I've worked in organizations where we had our own way of doing business analysis, and when we had our own job titles, our own job families. One of the trends that I saw in the data from the recruiter, there was a lot of combining of roles. So you might look for a business analyst / scrum master role or a business analyst project manager role, because they may be smaller organizations where they need you to extend that skill set. So again, if those are skills you have and you like flexing those, include those in your keyword search as well.
Yeah, I was reflecting recently on my career. My first job title was business specialist. Didn't have analyst in it at all. What is a business specialist?
I think my first title was something along the lines of implementation specialist. I
Yeah.
was working with a mainframe. I know we've talked about that, but that's what I did. I worked at the beginning. Well, I didn't work at the true beginning of the process, but I worked at the point where the client had purchased their system, and then my job was to go in and understand their process. So a little process analyst, but then also knowing how to configure our system and work with developers. So they can be anything, and that was a million years ago when I did that. Um, so the next question, I've always had various titles. What is the best format for the resume title? For the resume title or the job title? So let me answer this from based on some of the of what we talked about in our resume writing webinar. When you are putting together your resume, first, use a very basic, like don't get creative, because a lot of times organizations are using the applicant tracking systems, and so the more simple your resume is, the easier that it can be read by a machine, quite frankly. From there, one of the questions that we got in there was like, what if I had a very unique title that didn't really translate to something that is commonly known. You can use that title with maybe a little bit of explanation as to what it is. So I know we talked about making sure you include achievements in your resumes, but for example, I was a supervisor at one point. That was my official title in the organization, but really what I did was, I think I was like an enterprise quality manager or something. It was strange, but if you had called up the company, they would have said, no, she was a supervisor. So I think you can use the title that describes what you do, and then if they need more explanation about what it was, then provide it in the resume. I don't know, bit of a rambling answer. What do you think?
Well, I read it two different ways. So the resume title is sort of my name and what I do. I would stick to general business analysis and then put a description. So it's either your career goal or a summary of what you do, and write that in a way that you're talking to the gatekeeper, if you will, the person that is screening the resumes. So it's that recruiter. Write it in a way that articulates the type of work that you do. So keep the title as generic as possible, but put a meaningful description behind it. If it is the person asking about the job title in the resume, so it's an activity, like a position that you held, I would suggest maybe putting brackets beside it of what the generic role would be, right? So supervisor and brackets quality management or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Again, it can be a real wild west out there. I mean, over 700, almost 800 job titles. There's just a little bit of everything out there. So don't be too worried about having the perfect job title in your resume. And again, actually, this reminds me of something else that the recruiter told me. So many times in resumes, we focus on the responsibilities. So the job title I have today and the responsibilities that I have today,
Yeah.
but that may not be the job that you're looking for. So you do need to tailor that information. Again, focus on your outcomes and achievements, and focus on what it is that you want to do in this next role, if it is not exactly the same role. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Let's see. And so don't forget, we are live. We are talking about job titles today. So if you've got questions about job titles, or anything around what am I looking for? What am I searching for out there? Add that into the comments. Okay, so we've got another question. I've seen a lot of titles with business systems analyst and business information analyst. Do you think this is the same as a business analyst?
Great question. So I've had the job title business system analyst 3 times in my career, business system specialist, business system consultant. And is it the same as business information analyst? So there's no way to actually answer this. Every organization uses their own titles. There's no standard out there. The way I would read into this is business information analyst would be perhaps a role that's more geared to analytics. So someone who is looking at meaning and data and being able to provide that data to stakeholders to make better decisions, decisions based on data. That's my interpretation, but really what you need to do is look at what that job description is to understand it fully.
And this is why you can't just look at the job title alone and apply for it, because organizations very oftentimes have their own terms for things. They may create their own titles out of thin air, and I can tell you that's the case from the almost 800 that I saw in this list. They just make up titles. So when you see something, I would say if you see anything with analyst in the title, open it up and go deep. Make sure you use good keywords to get at least a grouping of job postings that reflect what your search should get, and then look at each one. That's what she was meaning by don't self-exclude just because you've only ever had a title of business analyst and you see a business systems analyst coming up in your feed, and that's not a job you've ever held. It could have responsibilities in there that you've done. So
Yeah.
the next question, who is a product analyst? Like specifically, I've been one of those. This was another category of job titles that I saw in the list that she sent me.
Oh
So
yeah.
I would see titles like project analyst, product analyst, systems analyst, technical analyst. Um, who is a product analyst? It is somebody who is doing some kind of business analysis on a product, is what it tells me.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
read it the same way. Yeah, really
Mhm.
diving deep, understanding that in a rich way.
And if we were to differentiate, so what's the difference between product analyst and say product manager? I would say a product analyst is somebody that puts together the requirements, puts together the details of how a particular product or feature is going to be delivered, whereas a product manager is very likely setting the direction for that particular product. They're coming up with, they may be doing the research. If I was in the insurance industry, doing the research with our analytics team, our actuaries to put together what that feature is. And then I might hand it off to a product analyst to do more of the detail for, okay, now really, how is that product going to work in the marketplace in our systems? So,
Yeah. Yeah. Let me grab the next question here. It says, in a resume, should I mention the designation / role name as per my current organization, or should I mention an appropriate title that suits what I do at the firm?
mm.
Thoughts on that?
I've had this happen to me, and I went with the latter option, which was it was going to be hard for me to talk about. I've been a supervisor when that was a minuscule part of my job. The
Mm,
thing that I really did was, I helped to build out process. And do quality checks for our IT organization. So it was easier for me to use a title that was descriptive of the role, even if at some point I had to just say, well, technically I was a whatever, an E5 supervisor, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't mean anything outside of your company. So have titles that will be meaningful. Don't lie, by the way, don't lie. But if it's, you know, so that's, I don't know what you think about
I,
that. You've
I'm
you've
going to take
hired more.
the opposite discussion, the opposite opinion on that one. I would suggest always stick with the formal title that has been given to you from the organization, but elaborate that. As I mentioned before, in brackets, put the generic meaning of it, or put descriptions below. I'm hesitant to put a title that I don't have formally from the organization, just for the slight risk that someone might see it somewhere else, and then there's a discrepancy, and it could be considered being dishonest and be thrown out of the process. So that's my conservative way of looking at it.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So there's tailoring your resume for the different for the different jobs you're applying for, but you shouldn't have a different job title for every job that you apply for. And so if you choose to say, like, I don't even remember what that title was that I used, but I have been consistent in using that title on LinkedIn in my resume, so I didn't customize it that much.
Yeah,
Next one, is it possible for a procurement engineer to be known as a procurement analyst or a supply chain analyst? Uh,
interesting.
Yeah.
Potentially. Again, have to look at the responsibilities. Engineer, to me, when I read that, the engineers I've worked with over time are extremely technical, and do more technical things than they would necessarily analysis. Um, but again, it really is looking at the role, because everybody interprets one word potentially different ways, right?
Yeah. And if you are a procurement engineer who wants to transition into one of those roles, I bet you have a huge amount of transferable skills. Because we've had that. I've had conversations with members who have said, I've been a developer for 10 years and I realized that I really like the work of business analysts. Um, do you think I could do that job? And I think, you probably come in with obviously a strong set of technical skills. So then really what you'll need to learn are business analysis tools and techniques. And you're probably already have a leg up on that as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I think
as-
to a key to a transition like that is having a mentor that
Mhm.
works in the business analysis space that can help bring you into that. When you're very technical, you can rely on those skills a lot, that can detract from some business analysis activities. So a mentor to help you through that transition would be helpful.
Yeah. So let's see. All right, we've got a next question. Oh, this is kind of a long one. I've worked for years as a program analyst and became a senior program manager, doing essentially the same role of a business analyst and project manager, but I'm struggling with transitioning that into a business analyst for my resume. So what do we think about that? I will say I think this is a really common kind of merging of roles. I have worked in organizations that didn't have a business analysis capability, or didn't even have business analysts at all. All of that was done on the project or program manager side. They really did do that. In fact, I can tell you they do it because PMI actually has a business analyst certification for just this purpose. It can be hard, I think, if you have worked more on the project management side, um, to craft that resume to focus on your business analysis skills. But think about this for a second. If you were a project or program manager, you were still achieving outcomes. And remember, that's the thing that you want to focus on in your resume.
Yeah.
And so speak to those instead of trying to find responsibilities in the project management work that you did. Because I can tell you as a BA, and I am admittedly a more project managing BA, I still have outcomes that I can achieve in a role of business analysis. And so that's my suggestion.
Yeah, and I'm wondering too if it might be, I'm just guessing here, it might be smaller organizations have that BA/PM type of role versus I've worked in a lot of large corporations. There's definitely a difference between those two. You'd never have one that's both. I have seen job postings that are a mix of those. So it might be that you can sort of flow one way or the other, stronger depending on where the market is. But it's definitely a skill set that works together. The large projects I've been on, partnered at the hip with a project manager. We back each other up in terms of our strengths and our weaknesses. That's really a critical relationship for large successful projects. So I think that's important. Why don't we talk about a few upcoming events?
Yes, let's do.
There are a few conferences happening next week. So if you're not aware of these, one is from our South Africa chapter. They have an event called Business Summit South Africa. So Rosalind will drop a link in the chat there so that you can check that out. I'm also going to be at BA World in Toronto next week speaking. So if you are in the GTA and you're attending the conference, please, I'd love to meet you in person. So we can not only speak live, but in person. So that would be good. We have a webinar coming up as well, October 27th, called What is a Business Analysis Job Title? So if you're enjoying this topic, want a little bit more detail on that, we're going to have some guest speakers that will join us. And Rosalind could drop a link in for that as well. You can register.
That's a public webinar. So if you are not a member, you can also join us. You can bring your questions. It's a great way to experience IIBA, but also get some great information that you can use. Also for the American audience, when Scott said the GTA, he was not meaning Grand Theft Auto. He was saying the Greater Toronto area. Don't worry, I gotcha.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's see. Alrighty, well, let's take this next question. Okay, financial business analyst or IT business analyst? The question starts, should we specify IT business analyst? Our community is more around IT. So when you mention just a BA to a financial specialist, there could be one perception. He has one perception than some IT people, the same compassion as IT architect. Okay, I'm not 100% following this, but Scott, let's see if we can answer it.
Yeah, it sounds like they're concerned about the financial analyst might think they're too technical and not understand what they do. So in terms of job titles, you could put IT in front of business analyst. But if you keep it generic, I think the challenge here is when you meet someone and you have the opportunity to talk about what it is that you can do and how you can help them out, talk about it in business analysis terms. I can help you figure out the root cause of issues you're working through. I can help you through working and finding solutions. It's a matter of describing what you do, I think is much more powerful than trying to perfect a job title. Again, in the English language or in any language, words can be interpreted differently. So a 3-sentence description is going to get you much, much further than 3 words.
Hmm. All right. I will let that be the final word on that question, because I am very interested in this next question.
Okay.
So if you're progressing from business analyst to the product owner role, how should you work on changing your perspective towards the role? Okay. I actually, because I think that there's a lot of overlap between the role of business analyst and product owner, in clearly even in our specialization graphic that we were just taking a look at, product owner is really just that T level. So it is still based on performing business analysis. You really have to have a good set of business analysis skills to do the work of product owner. But as a product owner, you are more focused, one, on a particular product, where you might not be as a business analyst. And because Scrum or some of the other agile frameworks out there specify a set of responsibilities, you might be doing some of those responsibilities, but still you're going to, do a lot of liaising with your stakeholders. You're going to be identifying backlog items with them, helping to prioritize. And to me, all of those things sound just like stuff that business analysts do. So in my mind, I don't really think about how I need to change my work um, as a business analyst moving into a product owner role. I really think about, okay, if I know I have to do these responsibilities because maybe that's what the organization says the product owner does, how can I enrich that role with all of the things that I bring because I have been a business analyst? And Corinne Anderson, she calls that job crafting. And I really think that's kind of what you have to do anytime you are transitioning from maybe a business analysis professional, maybe a generalist, and you're moving into one of those specializations. What are the great things you can bring into that role and make it even more important, more critical to the work that you're doing?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. The product owner role, I was an application manager at one point for a CRM system. And when I was in that role, yes, there was a lot of business analysis. One thing though that I learned through it was I felt more empowered. So it was a little bit more of a stewardship role than I had experienced in business analysis roles, where you're essentially a third party observing what's going on. You're not really at the table as a decision maker. I think in that product owner role, there is more of that. You're not the absolute decision maker, but you certainly do have input and more influence than what you might as just a general BA role.
yeah, and that's really a good point. My experience over the years have been many times organizations will pull people from the business side to perform that role of product owner. And I think one of the challenges that they have is that they don't always have that expertise in business analysis. Um, and so they are kind of, they may not be performing that role they may be doing it within the expectations of the organization or the project, but because they're missing a little bit, I don't think they're performing it to their best advantage. And that's where I think a business analyst professional really can do that role justice.
Yeah.
So let's see. Next question. We're doing okay on time. Maybe just a couple more. What kinds of business analysis roles at the beginning of a career opens up more opportunities in the future? Ooh, that's a great question.
Wow.
Yeah. So, um, ooh, you might have just stumped the speakers.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah. So I think this is a great question, and maybe this speaks to a little bit of what I just talked about. I do think when you have an opportunity to be a little bit of a generalist as a business analysis professional, like the first, I don't know how many, maybe first 10 years of my career, I bounced between IT and business a lot. And I found that incredibly helpful because it helped me to really understand what I could be doing. I spent a lot of time with developers very early, and that helped me to understand the technologies and the kinds of questions that I needed to ask. But on the business side, I learned how to talk to business people, how to understand business process. I say that really the first 10 years of my career, it was like getting an MBA because I went into companies and started to understand how they operate. I think bouncing between both for me has been really helpful. And then when I got interested in something, I, you know, I had a strong background. What about you?
Yeah, I was thinking about this from two different perspectives. One is if you were to start your career at a strategic level, that sort of might open up opportunities to get into more specific areas. But at the same time, when you're first starting, I don't think you've got the mindset of the appreciation for strategy.
Mhm. Yeah,
So I think really my answer would be there isn't really a sweet spot in terms of starting. It's just starting and learning those skills. One of the best learning environments is working with someone more senior in your discipline. You can learn a lot just by observing someone in a meeting, how they facilitate something. Um, so I don't think there is a specific answer there. It was a good stumper question, though.
excellent. I'll add one more thing because Angelo Calavella last week mentioned this when he talked about moving from business analysis into user experience. And remember, he said he focused, when he was making that move, he focused on one piece of user experience. And I think it was around data and taxonomy, information management. He said, I felt comfortable there. And working in there and doing it a lot gave me the confidence to be able to break out. So this is maybe where you want to think about how do you learn, and apply that to how you want to progress in your career. But I do think, and from the questions that I get from new members who may be more junior, um, I their focus tends to be, and I think this is the right approach, on techniques, tasks, and tools, because ultimately you want to learn the mechanics of how you do your job. You want to understand, when do I use a workflow diagram over a SWOT analysis? And you want a lot of opportunities to practice that. And then I think you get to a point where, as Fabricio Laguna says, you get that business analysis mindset. It's kind of muscle memory at that point. Now you know how to use all the tools and techniques. Then you want to start to challenge yourself. And it's really just, what are you interested in?
Yeah.
That can be where it takes you next.
One job title I've been curious about is um, maybe it's security analyst.
Mm.
So someone working in foreign intelligence, how does that work with business analysis? Because some of the skills that I use when I ask questions, I approach people and be able to peel back layers of the onion and get to know people. I wonder, is that really what's done in that intelligence world as well? I don't know. Maybe we can find a guest that can help us with that one.
I had Helen Patton, who is a chief security officer. She came to and spoke at one of our webinars this year, and she said, typically, if you're a security analyst, a cybersecurity analyst, or something like that, a lot of what you are doing is risk management. You are
Yeah.
identifying the weak points in either the people, the process, or the tools. You're not one of those fancy guys like battling the intrusion, because if you've already had an intrusion, it's too late. You didn't find those weaknesses. So really, their job is about risk management and root cause analysis. I thought that
Interesting.
was really interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Um,
speaking of cybersecurity, that's on our list for topics next time, isn't it?
Oh my goodness. I didn't even look today. But I think October is Cybersecurity Month. You are correct. And I better look really quickly because I think that's what we're going to be talking about next time. Oh goodness.
Yeah, so Rosalind's put a couple links in there for those of you who ask questions and we didn't have time to get to them. We will put them in our backlog and look at future topics for sessions. If you're watching this as a recording, either on a podcast or on YouTube, feel free to leave comments, ask us questions, and we can also put those in our backlog for consideration for future live sessions that we have.
Yes. Great point. And another really great conversation. Thanks everybody for joining us today. As Scott mentioned, when we get together October 12th, we're going to be talking about cybersecurity for business analysis professionals. What do they do? Who are they? Can you be one? Let's talk about it. And we will see you again in 2 weeks.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and we'll leave another one right here for you to help you in your business analysis career. If you haven't subscribed to the IIBA YouTube channel yet, you can click over here and click on the bell icon to get notified every time we publish a brand new video.